Hi guys, Melissa here at TCT Crafts, and I wanted to show you guys the difference in using a value mesh versus using a fabric or a poly jute mesh. I wanted to show you the difference in what the wreath will look like depending on the two types of mesh. Some people always ask, like, well, what's the difference in the mesh? So I'm going to give you a little show here. So this is just a value mesh. This came from Hobby Lobby, I believe, but you can get this value mesh at Hobby Lobby, Michael's, Walmart. This is just the thinner mesh that you can get at any of those type of stores. So I'm going to do half of this wreath form in this value mesh, and then I'll do the other half in the thicker fabric poly jute mesh, and you can see what the difference looks like and how thicker the better mesh makes your wreath look. So I'm going to start for this, and just for this training purpose, normally I would use pipe cleaners that match your mesh. I would use like a red, or if I'm using this, I would use the blue or the white. But for training purposes, so that you guys can see, I've used the bright yellow. And I'm going to, for this video, I'm going to cut our mesh at about 20 inches. So I'm going to just measure them here on my mat. We're going to cut it at 20 inches. And I'm just using my rotary tool. You can use a rotary tool, you can use scissors, whichever you prefer. But I'm just going to cut these at 20 inches. So let's do a couple of these, and then I will add them to the wreath form. Sorry guys. And you can see the difference in how the wreath looks with the value mesh versus the more expensive mesh. It is, for me, it's worth paying a couple extra dollars for the thicker fabric mesh, just because it makes your wreaths look so much fuller, and it just has a nicer look to it. But again, it's personal preference. Sometimes if you're just using the value mesh as a filler, it works good. Especially on the pine wreath bases, you can get away with using the value mesh because you've got all the pine tinsels that kind of help give the wreath fullness. But when I use my wire frames, I typically like to use the thicker mesh. So this one is just right at 20, so we're just going to tear that off. And then I will go ahead and cut this red one. Let me move this one out of the way. And let's cut this one at 20. Okay. So there's lots of different ways that you can add your mesh. You could purl, you could do a ruffle, you could do a cruffle. This is how I typically roll my mesh. It's kind of the I've heard it called cruffle, I've heard it called woodland ruffle, but what I do is I will just give my ends 1 to 2 turns, and then I will scrunch it up, and then I'm going to turn in these just a couple, and that gives me my little, so I'm going to go ahead and put this in. I'm going to do half of it with the red, and then I will do half of it with the thicker blue, and it'll give you an idea of what it looks like with the value mesh versus the thicker fabric mesh. So let's get these. I give these a good pull, get them nice and tight. We always want to make sure that they're nice and tight so they're not falling. A lot of times if you don't get these tight, these will start to fall sideways, and we don't want that. So again, I'm just curling the ends and scrunching up the middle. Deco mesh is going to fray. There is not a mesh out there that does not fray, but if you can turn those ends inside, it helps the fraying because you're tucking those cut ends on the inside of your ruffle, and so it does help with the fraying some. But unfortunately, Deco mesh is always going to fray. There's just no way of getting around that. Okay, let's do 2 more, and then we'll switch and we'll do the thicker fabric mesh. Now this fabric mesh did come from my shop, tctcrafts.com. That is where that fabric mesh came, but they have them online. You can get them at other craft supply places who sell online, but I do sell mesh in the shop, so that is where I got mine, is from tctcrafts.com. Okay, last red one, and then we will switch to the blue. So you can already see, here's kind of what our wreath form looks like with the value mesh. It's very airy. You can see straight through it. So I would not make a wreath just like that. I would have to add more to this to kind of fill it in. But let me show you now the difference in when we add this blue fabric mesh. I prefer the fabric or the Poly Jute. They're just thicker, and it's just a nicer mesh. You can already see how much thicker that ruffle is. So let's put that one in, get it nice and tight. Okay. I'm going to do the same thing. I curl the ends. When I get down here, I curl the ends. I'll show you another trick too on how to do these here in just a second. So I'll get this in there nice and tight. Okay. So another trick you could do if you can't hold the mesh as you're tucking the ends in, you can just give it 1 or 2 good twists. And I can use a little chip clip. This is what I did when I first started. Just use a little chip clip, turn it around, give it 1 or 2 rolls, and then scrunch it up. And then just take the clip off, and you've got your ruffle. Well, I don't know if you guys can already see how much thicker this is looking. So let's go ahead and finish what we have cut here. And I'll do the clip method one more time after this one, making sure this is nice and tight in there. Okay, let's do the clip method. So I'm just going to give this 1 or 2 rolls, just tuck it in, take my clip, hold it, roll these in, 1, 2, and then just scrunch up the middle, and then remove the clip. All right, let's do our last one, and then I will show you. We're not going to completely fill this frame up, but you'll get a good idea of what the difference looks like. Looks like we're just missing a couple. Okay, so here's our wreath form. Hopefully you guys can see on camera. You can already see how much thicker this wreath is. It's harder to see through versus this one, the thin value mesh. So if I was to make a wreath with this mesh, I would add more. I would add at least 2 of the 20 inches to this to give it more fullness. This one, you can already see it's pretty full. I typically, because I like big fluffy wreaths, would add probably another one anyway on this, but you can just see the difference in how full that is versus this. So hope that, guys, helps. You can see when you get this value mesh, it does work. You can make lots of pretty wreaths with it. You just need to use more. So even though it may be a little bit cheaper in the store, you're going to have to use more of it to get the same effect of this more expensive mesh. So hope this, guys, helped. I'll be back soon with more tips. Talk to you guys later. Bye, y'all.